So recently we got Season 3 of The Mandalorian, and as of writing and recording this, Ahsoka is also currently airing. That's two of the big Star Wars shows released this year, and while Ahsoka is actually pretty fun, I can't deny I'm starting to feel very burnt out in everything that has been releasing as of late. And apparently I'm not alone. A lot of people are in the same boat, with many not being very happy with the current state of affairs, which to an outsider might look odd. Andor, which recently released, has been critically acclaimed, and Ahsoka is getting great reviews so far too. Mando's first two seasons were really well received, and while there hasn't been nearly as much discussion about the third, surely that must be just as good, right? Well, let's start with the current state of the Star Wars franchise, and how Disney has been handling it. Their primary focus has been on TV shows, or rather, Disney+. The last Star Wars show to not be Disney Plus exclusive to my knowledge was Resistance, which aired its last episode in 2020. Side note, this is untrue. There's a show called Young Jedi Adventures, which I have never heard of until doing research for this video, that is currently airing on Disney Junior. Only exception though. Up until this point, we had Clone Wars from 2008 to 13, Rebels from 2014 to 18, and Resistance from 2018 to 20. One show at a time, and while the runtime in terms of seasons was getting shorter, these shows were still fairly meaty on their own. Alongside this, we had a movie releasing each year, and Mandalorian's first season airing at the end of 2019, which, as we'll discuss, sort of serves as the transitioning point. Now, some might argue this alone is already a lot, but then we get to this new era I am dubbing the Disney Plus era. Now, as already mentioned, Mando Season 1 kind of threaded the needle between these two, starting in 2019, then becoming the face of this new era very quickly as Resistance and the movies came to an end. From here on, we had Clone Wars Season 7 and Mando Season 2 in 2020, The Bad Batch, Visions, and Boba Fett in 2021, then Obi-Wan, Andor, and Tales of the Jedi in 2022, and now Bad Batch Season 2, Mando Season 3, Visions Season 2, which I didn't even know existed, and Ahsoka, all in 2023. And yeah, side note, I had no clue that Visions Season 2 had released. Like, genuinely, I don't even think I knew this was a thing. Where did this come from? Like, I vaguely remember hearing that Ghibli was doing something Star Wars, and apparently that's this, but I have never heard anyone talking about this. What happened? Like, I love that first season. What happened here? And I think that kinda sums up the issue. All these shows being pumped out in a streaming service practically no one actually owns, and then just adding to the massive pile of junk that is Star Wars right now. And this isn't even half of it. In terms of what's still coming, we've got, get ready for this, Skeleton Crew, The Acolyte, Andor Season 2, Mando Season 4, Lando, Bad Batch Season 3, Tales of the Jedi Season 2, Star Wars A Droid Story, Rangers of the New Republic, maybe Young Jedi Adventures, Rogue Squadron, which is a movie, that's canceled, a movie set at the beginning of the Jedi, a Dave Filoni mandoverse movie. What's a mandoverse, you ask? Good question. Then a movie about Rey, that isn't Episode 10, but is basically just Episode 10, and that one Taika Waititi film that may or may not be still happening, I don't really know. So, the Mandoverse is a term coined for the interconnected collection of Star Wars shows set between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens in the timeline. Starting with The Mandalorian, this includes the Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, Rangers of the New Republic, and the Dave Filoni film. Although Rangers might be cancelled, and we don't have any concrete assurance on if anything else will get retroactively added in, and Boba Fett's kind of just a one-and-done thing, so that we don't even know if that's continuing, and the same kind of goes for Ahsoka as far as we know. Also, the overall story seems to hinge on Ahsoka bringing back Thrawn, which is a direct continuation of the plot threads from Rebels, so that becomes required viewing alongside Clone Wars, and thus maybe The Bad Batch, which has set the stage in a way, and is airing at the same time, despite being set at a completely different point on the timeline, so basically it's Star Wars trying to be the MCU, while also releasing tons of unrelated stuff alongside it. Rather than focusing in on a single story, we continuously side-jump to a completely unrelated show midway through. And worse yet, sometimes these end up providing some level of importance to the Mandoverse story despite the timeline difference. For example, in The Bad Batch, they started introducing some of this cloning technology and a lot of stuff relating to that, this whole secret empire thing going on, and I guarantee it's going to end up being heavily connected to whatever it is that Grand Moff Gideon is doing in Mandalorian. So really, the term is extremely vague. Like watching Ahsoka without having seen at least a recap of Thrawn stuff would leave you pretty confused, and with so much stuff releasing at once, most people can't keep up. Even the hardcore Star Wars fans hardly can. But they also can't just choose one show or another, because apparently anything can end up being essential viewing on top of that. So, at this point, most people are just like, well, why bother keeping up with it all at all? Star Wars desperately wants to be what the MCU was, but in trying to be that, it only ends up being what the MCU is, right now, which is to say, kinda donkey doodle. The MCU is currently struggling hard, both in the TV front and the movie front. Reviews for most projects are real low, and so are box office returns, and Disney Plus viewership. Guardians 3 is really the only exception to this for this year, and that's kinda just its own thing right now, which I think is partially why it did so well. There was no required lore beyond the films everyone interested had already seen by this point, and it was a singular entry, not a big budget trailer for the next trough of slop for us greasy pigs to munch down on. Star Wars, meanwhile, has had plenty of standalone projects, but the issue is that they are all individual shows, which is a pretty big commitment to get into. And they are all Disney Plus exclusives, which, as it stands, a lot of people are starting to realize isn't the best streaming service in the market right now. We're coming off of the phase where every streaming service was a guaranteed hit, and now we're entering a phase where people are starting to realize that paying for all of these is too much, especially with the price increases across the board, so people are cutting subscriptions, returning back to one or two at a time, and this is understandable. This means that only a few, with the best output of content and most rewatchable backlog, are being kept. And when the only thing Disney Plus is really offering is super lore-heavy nerd franchises that are almost impenetrable to get into at this point for outsiders, most just don't see it as worth it. Now, of course, the value is what you make out of it. I want to clarify that by criticizing the current release strategy of these Star Wars shows, I'm not necessarily calling them all bad. In fact, I rather like quite a few of them. Ahsoka has been really good so far, and assuming it doesn't go the way of most Disney Plus shows towards the finale, I look forward to seeing it through. Bad Batch has also been really good, and I'm genuinely excited to sit down and watch the entire season of Visions that I apparently missed out on at launch. The first season was stellar. But at the same time, stuff like Mandalorian Season 3 and Book of Boba Fett and, heaven forbid, Obi-Wan Kenobi have left me really dry. I remember around the time that Obi-Wan came out, I was ready to swear off all Star Wars entirely, with only Bad Batch and Mando being the things I intended to check out since I was already invested in both of those. Mando Season 3 let me down, but Bad Batch kept me going, and when Andor turned out to be the surprised hit it was, I had to check it out for myself. So, while I personally am still watching, it's on shaky ground. With Bad Batch ending soon and my continued viewership relying entirely on the quality of Ahsoka as it goes on, I find myself in an interesting predicament. I don't really care about a Lando show or a Rey movie. Sure, those could be great, and hey, I'm happy for everyone who is looking forward to them. I don't think I'll check them out unless I hear they're really good, like what happened with Andor. And with the focus on quantity over quality, needing to push out 3 or 4 shows a year, that has me worried that they might not be. For every good show we get, there's always a massive disappointment waiting around the corner. Even now, I find it hard to keep myself excited about Ahsoka just due to that dread, that what if it turns out to be bad in the end? I hope not, but the fact that I have to worry about that at all should be telling. Star Wars wants to be Marvel, but that's not why I fell in love with this franchise for. That's not why Ahsoka quickly became one of my favorite characters in Clone Wars, and that's not why audiences worldwide fell in love with Grogu. We don't want every show to be interconnected. Like, sure, continuity is nice, but requiring viewership of everything can be very tiring, especially when there's this much of it, and we don't want this much of it. I mean, just look at the damage Book of Boba Fett did to Mando Season 3. Once people realized they undercut that amazing ending off-screen in a different show, most people dipped out. I don't blame them. Even I don't intend to watch Mando Season 4 right now. I have no interest. So unless things change for the better, I can't say I see this Mandoverse initiative playing out the way Disney clearly wants it to. But that's all just one loser on the internet's opinions, specifically a very rambly video. This video is very off the cuff, but I wanted to speak my thoughts on it while Ahsoka is still ongoing, and I've considered even doing an in-depth retrospective on some of the older Mandoverse entries, specifically Mando Seasons 1 and 2. I know I just went a whole rant about how much I'm dreading the future of this subsection of the franchise, but I do want to rekindle my love for Star Wars, so maybe taking a look back at the franchise might be a good idea? I don't know. Sound off in the comments below if this sounds interesting to you. Also, let me know what your thoughts are on the situation. What are your favorites of the recent stream of shows, or have you even seen or heard of any of these? Some of these were even a surprise to me. Anyway, I gotta get back to guarding the cellar so that the entity doesn't escape. Remember to subscribe and, yeah, ciao!